Finally, it gives you an idea why corruption is the source of the worst evils in the world. Do you know why there is hunger in Africa? And I just was there last year bringing food and mosquito nets to the poorest country, I think it's the poorest in Africa, Zimbabwe. It's all because of corruption. Zimbabwe was the breadbasket of Eastern Africa. It is now impoverished because of Robert Mugabe, a monster who is the head of that country, this dictator, who has his opponents burned alive. And it's corruption. I have spoken, and this has nothing to do liberal conservative, nothing. It's one of the rare areas where there's total agreement. The reason for starvation in Africa, to the extent that there is entirely corruption in Africa. The staggering amounts of money that are given are almost all of that money goes to corrupt governments and increases their corruption. There is enough food in Africa itself to feed Africa, let alone imports from other countries. That's how, and what's corruption? Stealing. That's it, stealing. They steal the funds that come in. But it doesn't sound so bad, corruption. Oh, it's a corrupt government. All right, it's horrific. It's horrific, corrupt governments. And all of this from Do Not Steal. One final word. That was my semi-final, penultimate point. And that is, I want to read to you a word about wealth, because a lot of Jews have ambivalence about wealth, and the Torah does not. Our patriarchs were quite wealthy, and we do not have models of poverty. We don't. Judaism does not regard the impoverished person as a model. This again from David Hazoni. How many lives have been saved or eased by the hospitals, immense charitable organizations, and legal aid groups that are built by the wealthy? What right do we have to judge them harshly for having been so successful and then channeling their wealth to helping others? Could such hospitals exist if these people had instead become writers or journalists or failed businessmen? Now, of course we owe to people to help people. The Torah has us tied. We are committed, you give 10th of what you have to the poor. By the way, the poor are obligated to give a 10th of what they receive. The concept of a non-taxed poor person doesn't exist in the Torah, in Judaism. It's very important lessons that can be learned. This is the book that I use for my value system. It's not the only, but it is the basis. And just this law alone, on how you treat a storekeeper, on what you can do in a store, on what you can do about downloading software or copying somebody else's software. A friend of mine, I'll tell you who it is, in fact, Rabbi Michael Gottlieb, one of the most wonderful human beings that we have in our Jewish population. He's a rabbi in Santa Monica. So he had the Talmud on compact disc, on a disc, an English Talmud. So Dennis, here, try it out. He said, I know that if you keep it, you'll buy it. Just try it out. He knew it. It was, you know how good I felt? That he knew I would not download it and keep it. I would try it out, but if I decide to keep it, of course I'll buy it. Otherwise, I stole. He knows it. He wouldn't do it. He knew I wouldn't. That's powerful stuff. That's ennobling stuff in daily life. And that, plus the issue of the dignity of property. Think of how people treat something they own versus how they treat something they don't own. It's not poverty and wealth that makes the difference between how people treat their abodes. It's whether they own it or they don't own it. Owning is good. Can you be too materialistic? You can be too anything. You could have too much exercise. But exercise is good, and so is property. It ennobles. And so my argument, ultimately, for do not steal as the root of the Ten Commandments and of the good life. Thank you.